Solving the equations is what we're going to look at in this video. We're going to cover almost every possible scenario. So this video is split into 8 parts. We're going to start off by looking at simple examples like this with addition, subtraction, then moving on to multiplication, and then division, and then both multiplication and division, and then multiplication and division with addition, then looking at use of brackets, then looking at fractions like this, and then finally looking at powers and roots. So the way my videos work, I'm going to do the example on the left, which is I do, and then you are then going to press pause and have got the example on the right, which is you do. So now you might look at this example and just say it's immediately the answer is, well, what is it going to be 2? Now, that's not how you want to do this. Now, the question's asking us to find the unknown, which is x. Now, what you want to ask yourself is, well, what's next to x? It's a plus 4. So we want to get rid of this. We want to get the x on its own. So if we get rid of this 4, we can do the opposite. So the opposite of plus is minus. And we do the same on the other side. So this becomes x is equal to, well, the 4's cancel out. So this will disappear because 4 minus 4 is 0. And on the other side, we have 6 minus 4, which becomes 2. Now, the reason we are doing it like this is because when the examples get harder, like this, for example, 5x plus 2 plus 7 is equal to 31, you won't be able to look at this and immediately know what the answer is, okay? So there's a process we are following. And it's also worth bearing in mind, whatever you do on the left of the equals, you do on the right. So for example, if I have 2 equals 2, if I add 1 to this side, that becomes 3. I have to add 1 to the other side, because otherwise it won't make sense. So whatever you do to the left, you have to do to the right, okay? So let me just leave that on, in fact. So hopefully you've pressed pause and had a got the example on the right. So here we have what I find x. So what has x got next to it? It's got 35. Let's get rid of that 35. And then we have x is equal to 15. So here we have got, again, another example. So we are looking for x minus 6 is equal to 9. So we want to get the x on its own. So let's get rid of this 6. So it's going to be the opposite here. So it's a plus 6. It's a minus 6, sorry. So we're going to add 6 on both sides. So that becomes x is equal to 15. And you can always substitute the value back in to make sure it makes sense. So if you put 15 into here, 15 minus 6 gives you 9. And on this side, hopefully you've pressed pause and go. So we're going to do the opposite here. So it's a plus. We're going to do the opposite to get rid of it. So that will now get rid of it on either side. Don't need that there. And then plus 171 here as well. So we have x is equal to 200 plus 171, which is 371. So moving on, here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now we're looking at multiplication. So we have 2x is equal to 20. Now there's a times sign in the middle. So we can write this as 2 times x is equal to 20. Okay, so we want to get this x on its own. Now, to get this x on its own, it's being multiplied by 2. So we're going to do the opposite of multiply by 2. So we're going to divide each side by 2. And then what happens is, this will cancel out because 2 divided by 2 is just 1. We still have the x left, so we can copy that down. And then we are left with 20 divided by 2, which is just 10. So that becomes 10. Now you can substitute this back into your answer and check if it's right. Yes, 2 times 10 is 20. Now moving on to the right. Again, we want to get the x on its own. So we're going to divide each side by 5 to get rid of the x. The 5, sorry. That becomes x is equal to 9. Moving on, again, we have 3x. We want to get the x on its own. So it's being multiplied by 3 at the minute. So let's get rid of that 3. Divide each side by 3. And that becomes 20 over 3 is equal to x. And we can leave it at that. It can't be simplified any further. And on the right, we have, again, we want to get the x on its own. So because it's being multiplied, we do the opposite, which is divide. So that becomes 25 over 4. So here, we want to find y. Okay, so you want to get the y on its own, but at the minute the y is being divided, so we can do the opposite to get rid of the 3. To get rid of the 3, because it's being divided, we're going to multiply each side by 3. What that then does is 3 times this on this side just cancels that out, so you're left with y is equal to 6 times 3 on this side, which is 18. And now if you substitute that back in, 18, divide that by 3, that gives you 6. So again, on the right, we're going to get rid of the 8. So currently the 8 is being divided, so we're going to times each side by 8. So we have x is equal to 16. Moving on, here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. So here we're looking at both examples with multiplication and division. So firstly, we look at this. We know we want to get x. So currently the x is being multiplied and it's being divided. Now it's easier to start by getting rid of the denominator. So if you get rid of the denominator, I'm going to do the opposite of what's happening. So it's being divided by 4. So I'm going to times each side by 4. That now leaves us with 5x is equal to 40. Okay, the x is still not on its own yet. We need to go again. So we have 5x. What's the opposite of times 5? Well, it's going to be divided each side by 5. So now that leaves us with x on its own. So we have x is equal to 8. And now you can substitute that back in to check the answer's right. Well, 5 times 8 is 40. 40 divided by 4 is 10. So my answer is correct. So looking on the right, first I'd get rid of the denominator. So times the top and bottom. Times both sides by 3. That gives you 2x is equal to 80. Next, I'll get rid of the 2. Divide each side by 2. That gives me x is equal to 9. Again, here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now, moving on. So with this, we have 2x plus 1 is equal to 9. Now, again, looking at the x, it's got a 2 next to it. But there's also this minus 1. It's easier if we start off by getting rid of this minus 1. So if I do minus 1 on each side, I end up with 2x is equal to 8. Now, all I need to do is get rid of that 2. So if I divide each side by 2 to get the x on its own, I end up with x is equal to 4. And if I substitute that in, I will get my answer. Now, the other way of doing this is, well, what if instead of 2x plus 1 is equal to 9, instead of getting rid of this 1, I got rid of the 2 first. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that you can't do this, but it's a little bit trickier. So if you started off by getting rid of the 2 first, you would have to divide each side by 2. So this will become 9 over 2, which is fine. And on this side, this is where you have to be careful. Yes, the x becomes just x because this 2 and this 2 cancel out, but you divide the whole thing by 2, okay? So here when you subtracted by minus 1, you did subtract the whole thing by minus 1, but you can't do that, subtract that, so we only do that there. But when you divide by 2, you are dividing this whole thing by 2, so you then it becomes plus a half here. Okay, now that is key to note here, because if you don't get that right, you will get this question right. So now that we've got this, we have x is equal to 4, because if I subtract a half from each side to get rid of this half to get the x on its own, I end up with the same answer. But you can see that this way is a little bit messier. It's easier if we just start by getting rid of the plus 1. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. So I want to get the x on its own. At the minute, it's got 13 there. So I'll do the opposite of minus 13, which is plus 13. So that becomes 3x is equal to 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's 21. And now I want to get the x on its own. So I divide each side by 3. And we get x is equal to 7. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now, moving on. So again, the exact same thing here. The goal is to get x on its own. So it's easier to get rid of the 2 first. So we'll get rid of that. So the opposite of plus 2 is minus 2. That now becomes x over 3 is equal to 3. And now we want to still get the x on its own. It's not quite on its own yet, but it's being divided by 3. Well, what's the opposite of dividing by 3? Well, that's going to be multiplying each side by 3. So now the x is on its own, and we get the answer as 9. And you can substitute that back in to make sure your answer's right. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. Get rid of the 6 first, and that becomes x over 8 is equal to 7. And then get rid of the 8 to get the x on its own. And then that just becomes 8 times 7, which is 56. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now, moving on. So we have this example here. Again, it'll be easier to get rid of the 1 first. So let's get rid of the 1. So we have 5x divided by 2 is equal to 10. Now, we still want to get the x on its own, of course, but it's easier to get rid of the bottom part of the fraction, the denominator. So to do that, we can times the top, times each side by 2. And that becomes 5x on this side now is equal to 20. And finally, now to get the x on its own, we just divide each side by 5. So we have x is equal to 4. And you can always substitute that back in to make sure it's right. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. It will be easier to get rid of the 3 first. So we'll start with that. You do the opposite. So it's a negative 3, so we add 3. That now becomes 10 is equal to 4x over 9. I'm now going to get rid of the 9. And I am now going to get rid of the 4. So we have x is equal to 90 divided by 4, and that can be simplified a little bit more, so that can be written as 45 over 2. And you can always go back, add that back in to make sure you get the right answer. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. So now we're dealing with negatives. And again, you might immediately look at this and say the answer's 2. And that's not really the mindset that we want to get into, because remember, we are solving, finding the unknown here. So the way you would do that is you want to get x on its own. So what's x got next to it at the minute? It's got a 5. What's the opposite of a plus 5? This 5 is positive because it doesn't say it's negative. It doesn't have a negative there. So how do you get rid of a positive 5? You do the opposite. So the opposite of that is just going to be minus 5 on each side. Now notice the sign will stay with the x. X is negative. We have negative x is equal to negative 2. Now, we've been asked to find the unknown. So we just want to find x. So we've got negatives. We've got a negative here. Now to get rid of this negative 1, we have to times each side by negative 1. Okay, so if I now times each side by negative 1, times that by negative 1, times that by negative 1, and I end up with x is equal to 2. Now this might have seemed a bit long-winded, given that you might have been able to see the answer straight away, but when the examples get harder, it won't be this straightforward, okay? So sometimes you might end up with minus x is equal to a value, and all you have to do is subtract times each side by minus 1 to get your final answer. So hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this example. Again, if you want to get x on its own, so we're going to do the opposite here to get rid of the 12. So that then gives us x is equal to minus 3. Minus x is equal to minus 3. And now we're just times each side by minus 1. And that gives me x is equal to 3. And looking at this one, so I'm just going to take 10 away from here, 10 away from here, and then we have minus x is equal to 5, and then we have x is equal to minus 5 because we times each side by minus 1. So this time the answer is minus 5. Okay, so this will become 10 minus 5 is equal to 15 because the two negatives become a positive. Okay, so this one may seem a little bit trickier. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. So we have a 7 here. We can get rid of that 7 like this. And that becomes minus x is equal to 2. But we're not looking for minus x, we're just looking for x. So we're going to times each side by minus 1. So that now makes the x on this side positive, but that now becomes negative. And if you substitute that back in, the answer actually is 9, because 7 minus minus 2 will give you 9. The two minuses become positive. So now looking at this, again, we are looking for x. So it's going to be the easiest for me to first get rid of the 4. So the 4s are positive, so I'll do the opposite on each side. Now that gets rid of the 4. Remember, the sign carries over from the 3x minus 2. Okay, so this sign here is with this, so that stays. And this is equal to 12. Now I'm going to get rid of the 2 next, so I'm going to times this side by 2 and this side by 2. So that becomes minus 3x is equal to 24. Next, I'm going to get rid of the 3. We have minus x is equal to 24, divide that by 3, which gives you 8. And finally, remember, we're not looking to find minus x, we want x, right? So we're going to times each side by minus 1. And that gives me x is equal to minus 8. And you can always substitute that back in to make sure you get the right answer. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this example on the right. So plus 2 here, plus 2 here. I'll go through this a bit quick. Minus 4x, so just remember to bring the minus with this, 12, times each side by 5 to get rid of that, which gives us minus 4x is equal to 60. Divide each side by 4, so that'll be 60 divided by 4, which gives us 15. So divide each side by 4. And remember, that's minus x, so we're just going to times each side by negative. That gives us the final answer as negative 15. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. So moving on, we are looking at questions like this now. Again, we want to find x, but it's easiest. You always ask yourself the question, what's the easiest thing to get rid of to get x on its own? The easiest thing to get rid of here is that 2. So since it's being divided, we'll do the opposite. Now that gets rid of the 2. So we're left with 4 plus x is equal to 3 times 2, which is 6. Okay, so that has cancelled that out. And now I can subtract 4 on this side and 4 on this side, and we have x is equal to 2. So that's that done. And again, hopefully you've pressed pause and add the example on the right. So here, I would first get rid of the minus 2. So I would add 2 on each side. That's the easiest thing to start with. You could have started with the 10 as well, by the way, but we'll just make sure you've also multiplied this by 10 if that's how you started. So that'll be 8 plus x over 10 is equal to 9. Now I'm going to multiply it by 10, which then means it becomes 8 plus x is equal to 90. And then I'm going to subtract each side by 8, which becomes 82. And then if you substitute that back in, you will get the answer as 7. So moving on. And again, the easiest thing to start with here is getting rid of the 2. So I'm going to get rid of the 2 first. So that becomes 5x minus 6 is equal to 14. Now I'll get rid of the 6. And now I'll get rid of the 5. And again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this example. So times each side by 8. And that becomes 11x minus 25 is equal to 80. And then I'm just going to add 25 and 25. So that'll be 80 plus 25, which is 105. So that'll become 11x is equal to 105. And then I'm just going to divide each side by 11. And then we have x is equal to 105 divided by 11, which is 105 divided by 11. And you can just leave your answer as that. That is the simplest it can be written. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now moving on, we're looking at cases with brackets. Now you can start off by expanding these brackets if you want. There's 2 ways you can do that. Either you can expand these brackets and solve it from there, or you can get rid of the 3 if it's divisible by the other side and it makes your life easier. So what I'll do in this example is I'll get rid of the 3 first. So this whole thing is being multiplied by 3. So I'm going to divide each side by 3. And the reason for that is it will get rid of this 3 here. So that then becomes 2x plus 1 is equal to 9 divided by 3, which is 3. Now, I'm just going to carry on as usual. So get rid of the 1. Now I'm going to get rid of the 2. And there's your answer. Okay. Now, it is worth mentioning here, this approach worked well because 9 was divisible by 3. And that worked quite well. If it wasn't divisible by 3, it would have probably been easier to expand these brackets out. Now, as I say that, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this example on the right. Now, what I would have done here is multiplied out the brackets. Now, you can still do the division by 4 if you want to. It would still get you the same answer, but it makes your life a bit harder because this doesn't simplify nicely like this did. So you'll have to deal with fractions, but it still gets you to the same answer. So if I did this, that becomes, multiply this out, so that's 12x plus 8 is equal to 14. It's just remember, with these you have to ask yourself, how can I make my life easy when doing these? Because there's multiple ways of solving this, and I'm showing you the easiest way. Now, to make my life as easy as possible now, it makes sense to subtract by 8. So that will be 12x is equal to 14, take away 8, which is 6. And then we have, well, divide each side by 12, and we have x is equal to 6 over 12, which can be written as 1 over 2. So that is our answer there. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Moving on, now we have multiple x variables, and we need to find the unknown. So again, the question I always ask myself is, how can I make my life as easy as possible? Now, I don't like to deal with negative values of x, so I can see the bigger value of x is here. So the first thing I'll probably do is get rid of this x here and this. Now notice what's happened by doing this. Now there's only 1 x left. Yeah, but that's all we've got to deal with. So now we can subtract 3 here. That becomes x is equal to 6. And now if you substitute that back in, that equation should equal to each other. So again, on the right, when I look at this, I want to make my life as easy as possible. This is bigger than this. And so I'm just going to get rid of this here and this here. And then that becomes 20 is equal to 2x plus 2. And now it's quite straightforward. Minus 2 here, minus 2 here. That becomes 18 is equal to 2x. Now divide each side by 2. and that becomes x is equal to 9. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. And now moving on, we have multiple x variables with brackets. And again, it's the exact same case. How can I make my life as easy as possible? So when I look at this, it makes sense for me to expand the brackets out on the right. So that's what I'm going to do first, because I can't see the other side being divisible by 5 in any way. So that should be 15. And now, again, exact same approach. It makes my life easier if I just get rid of the x, so it's just on one side. So that's that. And now subtract 15 from each side. That becomes 5 is equal to 4x. And the final answer, divide that both by 4, is going to be x is equal to 5 over 4. So, again, looking at the right, dividing each side by 4 doesn't really make my life any easier, so I'll expand the brackets out. Now I can see that the bigger value of x is on the left, and if I get rid of it here, I'll just have 1x left to deal with, which is just going to be on this side. And now if I add 8 to each side, that gets rid of that. So I'm now left with 11x is equal to 88. And now if I divide each side by 8, I'll end up with x is equal to 88 over 11. And the answer is 8, because that is divisible by the 11 times table. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now moving on. So we've got multiple x variables with a fraction now. Again, the question is always, how can I make my life as easy as possible? So looking at this, I want to get rid of that straight away. So I'm going to multiply each side by 4. It will make my life a lot easier. So this becomes 12x minus 8. When I multiply this side by 4, by the way, you're multiplying this whole thing by 4. That and that. And on this side, the 4's just cancel out, so that's x plus 80. And now, again, it's the exact same. It's very similar to the last question we just did, in fact. So we can just get rid of x on this side, x on this side. That becomes 11x minus 8 is equal to 80. Now, if I add 8 to each side, that becomes 11x is equal to 88, which means x is equal to 8 when you divide them two together. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. So I would start by getting rid of the fraction at the bottom. So 9x plus 34 is equal to 15x plus 10. And now I can see that the 15 is bigger. So I would subtract 9x from each side to cancel it out on this side. What that does is it gets rid of the x on this side. So we've only got an x on this side to deal with. We only want an x on one side, really, to make our life easy. So if I change colors, 3, that is that, 6x plus 10. And if I subtract 10 from each side, that means 24 is equal to 6x. If I divide each side by 6, that means 6, 12, 18, 24. And the answer is 4 there. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. And now moving on, we have a fraction equal to a fraction. Now, to make my life as easy as possible here, I'm going to times... What am I going to do? So I am going to move this 4 over to this side, and I'm going to move this 3 over to that side. So how am I going to do that? So if I times this side by 4, and this side by 4, that would get rid of that for me. So that will become, I won't expand it all out just yet. I'm just going to write it out. So that'll become 4 bracket 2x plus 5 all over 3 is equal to 3x minus 4. So because this 4 has cancelled that out. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to multiply each side by 3 to get rid of this 3. So that then becomes, if I get my pen, so times 3 on this side, times 3 on this side. So that makes it 12. So 4 times 3, which is 12, still leave the brackets in, is equal to 3 bracket 3x minus 4. And now we are left with this. And now I can see if I divide each side by 3, I can make my life a little bit easier, because this and this are divisible by each other. So you can now expand it out if you wanted to and solve it from there. but I can make my life a little bit easier because I can simplify the numbers. So if I divide each side by 4, what that does is this becomes 3 bracket 2x plus 5, and this just becomes 3x minus 4. And now if I expand this out, that's 6x plus 15 is equal to 3x minus 4. And if I now subtract 3x from each side, that becomes 3x plus 15 is equal to minus 4. And now if I do minus 4 minus 15, that becomes 3x is equal to minus 19, which then gives us a final answer of minus 19 over 3 in its simplest form. And if you substitute that back into here, you'll find that these both sides are equal to each other. So, and also, is there anything else worth mentioning here? No, I don't think there is. So that is that. So again, the same on this side. We want to get rid of the denominators. Let's start with the 4 first. So if we get rid of the 4, you have to times each side by 4. So again, I won't expand things out yet because it could make your life easier if you hold off the expansion. So I'll write in brackets, and this side is going to be 5x minus 1. And if I now times each side by 6, I can get rid of the 6 here. So that then becomes 4 bracket 3 is equal to 6 bracket 5x minus 1. Now, looking at this, I can just go ahead and expand it. But a little tip here, you can divide each side by 2 to make the numbers a bit smaller, because if the numbers are smaller, they're easier to work with. So for example, if I just divide each side by 2, now you might be wondering, where does the 2 come from? Well, because they're both, well, you could have actually even simplified it here. But you can, at this point, go ahead and expand this or divide each side by 2, because it will, as long as you're doing the same thing to each side, it doesn't make a difference, it's still equal. Okay, so if I divide each side by 2, because they're even numbers, this becomes 2 bracket 3x plus 9. And if I divide this side by 2, that becomes that. It makes my life easier now, because if I multiply this stuff by 6, the numbers get quite big. And if I multiply this by 4, the numbers get big. Now, the numbers are going to be smaller now, so it's 6x plus 18. You still get the same answer, but it's always about, can I make my life easier? And now if I subtract 6 from each side, I'll end up with 15 take away 6, which is 9x. So that's 9x. And then if I add 3 to the other side, I end up with 21. So I end up with 21 is equal to 9x, and my answer is 21 over 9. And they're both divisible, in fact, by the 3 times table. So that'll become simplified as 7 over 3. So my final answer is 7 over 3. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now moving on, we're looking at powers. So here we've got, we want to find n, and at the minute it's 2n squared. So firstly, we want to get the n on its own. At the minute it's being multiplied by 2. So if we start off by getting rid of the 2, divide each side by 2, that leaves us with n squared is equal to 4. Now what's the opposite? We want to get rid of the squared. What's the opposite of squared? It's square root. So we're going to have to square root the 4. So that means n is equal to square root of 4, and the square root of 4 is equal to 2. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. Divide each side by 3 to get rid of the 3. Now we have n squared is equal to 48 divided by 3, which is 16. And now to get rid of the squared, you square root. So n is equal to the square root of 16, which is equal to 4. Moving on, again, to make my life as easy as possible, I'll get rid of the 5 first. So we have 2x squared is equal to 8. Next, I'll get rid of the 2. X squared is equal to 4. And finally, to get x on its own, we just have to square root each side, so that becomes 2. Again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. So this will become plus 4 plus 4. So that is 5x squared is equal to 125. And then we have x squared is equal to 25. And then here we just want to get x on its own, so that's square root of 25, which is equal to 5. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now moving on, so we have a square root here. So we want to get x on its own, but x is being square rooted. Now the opposite of square root is square, so that means x is equal to 4 squared, which is equal to 16. And on this side, we want to first start by getting rid of the 5. So it's a positive 5. We can get rid of that like that. So we have root x is equal to 3. And now the opposite of square root is to square. So that just becomes x is equal to 3 squared. And that's just going to be 9. So looking at this, we can again, to make life as easy as possible, get rid of the 5 first. So that becomes square root 2 is equal to 4. Now I can multiply each side by 2 to get rid of the 2 in the denominator. And then finally, to get the x on its own, the opposite of square root is square, so that becomes 64. And on this side, we can get rid of the 1 to make our life as easy as possible. We can times each side by 3. And that becomes square root x is equal to 9. And the opposite of square root is square, so that just becomes 9 squared, which is 81. Now, with this one, you want to get the x on its own is always the goal. But this whole thing sits inside a square root. So the first thing you want to do is square. And then when you square each side, this is what happens. You end up with this. Okay? And we can tidy this up. In fact, we can write this 3 squared as 9. Now that square root's gone. And now it's quite straightforward to solve, hopefully. So all you do is add 1 there, add 1 there. So 2x is equal to 10. Divide each side by 2. X is equal to 5. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had to go at the example on the right. As usual, the whole thing lives in a square root. So let's get rid of the square root. So we square each side. So essentially we're doing like to the power of 2. And now it's quite straightforward. It's what we've been doing in previous examples. And then divide each side by 4. And the final answer is 5. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now, if you would like some more examples on this, I've got a full worksheet linked in the comments down below. And if you did find this video useful, I've got loads of other content on my channel. Do check it out.